All right, here we are, Ep.2 at the Tracktion compound. Cullen Ronan here, joined by Mike Bachmann and Kirby Paulson. We had quite an eventful weekend / Monday, I guess, here with the Daytona 500. But Denny Hamlin is your 2020 Daytona 500 champion. Granted, there are a lot of storylines to go along with it, that's for sure. The Chevys, the Fords, they all came and went, but it was the Toyotas at the end that picked up the W in both an exhilarating and anxious fashion. Granted, given what happened on the final lap, the jostling for the win between Ryan Blaney and Ryan Newman obviously made headlines, but lucky that he's all right. So prayers to him. Hopefully we see him in the ride soon. But fellas, it was an eventful weekend. What are your thoughts on what happened there between Sunday and Saturday?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it was like a whirlpool of emotions just between the 2 days. We talked about it in the group chat. It was such a beautiful start. The ceremonies were great. Everybody seemed really excited. Things were packed. We were ready to rock. And then to get, just a few laps in and have everything come to a screeching halt, I think was a rough moment. But I think for what it meant, Monday picked up pretty good. I know the first thing we talked about was how good the crowd looked on Monday, and I think there was still that same amount of energy. Good for Denny and everything, but I also want to just preface this with the fact that I think the Ryan Newman accident really shed a light on just how close the NASCAR industry is in general. This is something that I speak about to everyone that'll listen, but I think this is something we all can agree on is there's such a close-knit community, and whether that has to do with fans, executives, employees, drivers, whatever it is, there's such that close-knit community with it. So I think it was really something to just see how much basically the country and the industry itself kind of rallied around him. Incredible to see him walk out of that hospital with his two girls there. It was kind of like a sigh of relief after everything, after Steve O'Donnell got up there and said, they don't think that it's overly life-threatening. So thank goodness for that. A lot of prayers are sent up, but what a weekend. I mean, my goodness, some good racing, but like I said during that first episode, it's Daytona. It was unpredictable. We knew it was going to be unpredictable, and that outcome was just not what I was expecting.
Yeah, great points there, Curb. I mean, like you said, whirlwinds of emotions this weekend. Everything from the pre-race ceremonies, getting all the hype, all the fans there. It seemed like a beautiful day from the beginning. And then as soon as the cars hit the track, Mother Nature had different plans. And, it's not the first time that we've seen a 500 run on a Monday. But to your point, the fans were still there. Stands were pretty packed and, drivers brought it. We saw a lot of great close racing between the stages, and Denny Hamlin put together a complete race in Denny Hamlin fashion and goes back to back for the first time since '94. So that was pretty exciting, but obviously scary situation there at the end with Ryan Newman. I mean, those 2 hours were some of the most agonizing 2 hours that I have ever experienced as a NASCAR fan. I mean, and it just goes to show, as you said, just how much of a community that NASCAR is, from fans, drivers, everybody in the industry coming together and just, being together for those 2 hours, waiting for Newman and just hearing the word. And it is absolutely remarkable seeing him walk away in just 48 hours. I mean, it just goes to show what the safety advancements have done. And Newman has been a contributing factor to that. I mean, the guy's got an engineering degree from Purdue, and he's been one of the most vocal about all of these safety advancements in the past 20 years. I mean, basically since he's stepped foot in the sport, he's been helping implement these changes. And even in the cockpit, I'm pretty sure they have the Newman bar, which was named after him. So, I mean, I'm interested to hear his thoughts on what exactly happened in the car, and possibly what, in essence, could have saved his life. It'll be interesting to hear all that. But, I mean, obviously, it's just incredible seeing him walk away from that, and extremely happy because, I mean, those were some of the most, agonizing moments there.
Yeah, it's crazy how life sometimes comes full circle with the whole Newman bar potentially being a lifesaver. But I think this weekend was especially tight weekend for all of the NASCAR community, not just because of the tragedy as a whole, but because of the racing. We had so many people in the stands on Sunday afternoon. Granted, that didn't get to, be appreciated to its fullest extent, but it was a really cool moment to see the community come together for not only the 500, but to see everyone on social media band together unanimously for Ryan Newman at the end. Of course, there are going to be some naysayers that hopped on Denny for celebrating, which, of course, it's misguided anger. Everyone was upset about the situation. I think sometimes you look for people to blame, but what happened with Ryan Newman, there was no one to blame. That's racing in 2020. That is super speedway racing personified. You hate to see it, but that's what comes with this style of racing. But I mean, at the same time, we see races like the Brickyard with 1/10 the capacity filled. And just to see a weekend and have the energizing feeling of knowing that there's over 100,000 people in those stands, it was really great to be a part of, regardless of what happened in the end. We got a great race. The end obviously came with its ups and downs, but at the end of the day, it was an entertaining race, and I'm excited for the rest of the NASCAR season. So I think it certainly did its job there. Even looking at viewership numbers, I know I'm not the only one. The numbers for this race were through the roof, and I think that says a lot to what NASCAR is building towards here in the future.
Yeah, I think it really just showed the fact, and we talked about this on the last episode, just how much it's kind of on that upward swing again. I think there was a lot of appreciation throughout the country for it. And, looking back on this entire weekend, I perhaps it's not the example that we would have talked about in terms of, what's going to put the sport on the map here. But I think that the celebration of the sport in general was really, really, really strong. And it was honestly a bit surprising to me just how much it seemed like everyone kind of grabbed hold of the 500 in general. So that was a nice, somewhat refreshing take. And I'm interested to see, where things kind of go from this season. We're going to a track like Vegas where it's a little bit of a different speed. So, it's going to completely change everything, especially going from a super speedway to more of a 1.5 mile track setup. And I just think it's going to be a different style, but I think this is a really good first stepping stone beyond what could have been an awful tragedy. Thank God Ryan is okay. So, now I think it was a pretty good foundational step there.
Bach, you talked about it earlier, how long those 2 or 3 hours were before we got an update on Ryan Newman. But in those hours, we got to watch the replay, 15, 20 separate times looking for each incident. Looking back, I know I didn't end up coming up with anything, but did you guys look back at it and think, man, this could have been avoidable had maybe Blaney not gotten into his bumper so hard? Maybe had Newman not tried to block? Were there any instances in your head where you thought maybe this was avoidable, or was this truly just the nature of the last lap of the Daytona 500?
I mean, the way that these cars are now, their bumpers just don't line up to the back. And, we saw a lot of time throughout that race, cars getting squirrely on their own in these packs. And I just think, I think Ryan had to do what he did. And I mean, you even heard Blaney in his interview. At that point, he was ready to push him to the win. And unfortunately, it was just a little bit of a chain reaction. And, unfortunately, it sent Ryan through the wall. But I don't know if anything in particular could have been avoided or changed in a way. I just think the nature of these cars, how fast they're going, and these closing rates that we've seen, especially at this last race, unfortunately, these things happen. But with that said, and as I mentioned this before, I mean, the whole crash itself, Newman got hit in the worst spot you can possibly get hit with the least amount of safety. But nonetheless, the advancements that the sport has made just goes to show, how great these cars are from inside the cockpit, because it could have been a lot worse. But I don't know if necessarily anything could have been avoided for this. I just think that it's a product of today's super speedway racing. That's just what it is.
I mean, Cullen knows this because, we live together, and I hope he would have known this, but I don't deal in hypotheticals. I don't believe in hypotheticals. It's just not my thing. So going back and looking at it, and quite frankly, watching the replay, to me, it was kind of disturbing, to be quite honest. Just seeing the impact of of him coming off the wall and then that driver's side just getting smashed. It's something that I really have been thinking about all week, and just the utter uncertainties of life in general, not to get deep, but that's just the reality of it. So thinking about hypotheticals wasn't going to help the situation. What I will say is that, in the moment, it's hard not to wonder what could have been. So, I might not have watched the replay as much as everyone else, just because it was rough. For whatever reason, I just couldn't bring myself to keep watching it. I think in the long run, the most important part is that he's okay and he's with his family. I think that's the most important part. And going back and asking ourselves, do you think anything could be different? The reality is if Ryan Newman takes this experience and walks away and says, I'm retiring and I want to spend the rest of my life with my family, you're not going to hear a complaint from me or just about anyone else. That's just how it is. So I just think it's really tough to deal in hypotheticals.
And with the breath of fresh air that, the NASCAR community collectively sighed when we found out Ryan Newman was okay, there became questions of who was going to take over his ride now that it was up for grabs per se. But, now that we know that he's all right and we don't have to speculate anymore, Ross Chastain has been put into that seat, a Cup Series veteran, but obviously with lower end equipment. He's never been in a ride this good before. He's had moderate success in Xfinity with Chip Ganassi before that program run under. We saw him wheel himself to a second place finish in the Truck Series last year, starting halfway through the season. What are our expectations for him taking over this ride from Ryan Newman, who is unquestionably the leader of this Roush Fenway team at the moment?
Yeah, what Ryan was able to do in just 1 year, take a 25th at best car and make the playoffs last year is simply remarkable. I don't think anybody expected that, especially after what he did at RCR with just getting one win in however many years he was with them. But I don't expect much from Chastain, honestly. Don't know how long that this is going to be. If he's going to be their guy going forward for however long Ryan needs. I don't know how much we can necessarily expect, just because, I think Chastain has made the most out of all of his rides. I think he's a guy to look out for in the future in the Cup Series, possibly running. But right now, I just don't think that anything significant is going to come out of this. I just think that, they need to – I'm glad that they're running the car, but I just think that they needed somebody to fill it. And, Chastain is a solid option. Get him some more experience, and we'll see kind of where he goes from there.
I think if anything for Chastain, it's more of a risk on his part almost, because realistically, and I know that's probably a blazing hot take, but realistically, when you think about it, if he's going to be up for some of these other rides that are going to come available, this is kind of like a tryout for him in terms of really being able to show what he can do with this really good equipment and with a really strong team around him. I think it's very clear that Roush Fenway is nothing to scoff at ever. They also have an extremely incredible facility and a great gift shop museum area. I highly suggest anyone that's down there in that area to stop by. But all I'm saying is in terms of being able to come out on this big stage, I think this is going to be a big moment for him in terms of proving himself to the other teams for his future. And for Roush Fenway, I don't want to call him a stopgap, but at the same time, they needed someone who they knew they could trust and at the same time still be competitive in the seat. He might not be at the top echelon. He might not be at that next echelon, but he's going to be there and he's still going to contend in situations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and he had prior to his wreck there at the end of the 500, he was having a really good performance. He ran in the top 10 most of the day. He hung with the big dogs, but unfortunately the closing rates are just so fast, and he got hung up on the apron and took out a bunch of buddies with him too. So maybe not buddies so much after the race, but he's a guy who has proven, at least in the lower series, that he can take top end equipment, even lower end equipment, and put it in victory lane. So hopefully he can take what he's learned there and translate it to this Cup opportunity, because you're right, Kirby. Silly season 2021 is fast approaching, and he's one of those guys that's been thrown around quite a bit. So if he can prove himself in moderate to successful equipment here in the Cup Series, that's definitely going to make him a lot more viable of a candidate here in the near future.
Long season, boys. We'll see.
Yeah, that's for sure. But The 500, I know I touched on it earlier, but viewership was 11 million viewers there at the beginning on Sunday before obviously the rain out. We ended at after Monday with 7 million, which was just a shade under the year before, which was ran on a Sunday. So had it been ran on the normal day it was supposed to, we would have had a 2 million viewer increase.
That's pretty darn good.
That's an encouraging sign.
I mean, that's nothing to stick your nose up to. I mean, that's pretty good. And I think it's a really encouraging sign. It's a really encouraging sign.
And the last 20 laps, those finishing laps were up 19% from last year. So where it counts, we had all the extra viewers. Obviously, not the way you wanted to see it. We didn't get to celebrate a great race, that it was. But cool to have all the extra eyes back on the sport. And as morbid it is to say almost, this Ryan Newman incident really did bring sporting fans together from all across, all across the nation. I had kids I've never spoken to NASCAR about come up to me because obviously they know I'm the NASCAR guy and
really
discussing about what happened. But it's really cool to see that not only did the NASCAR community really band together for Ryan, but I think collectively the sports world did as well. And that can kind of be mirrored in even NASCAR Race Hub and NASCAR America. Their viewership was through the roof this week. So people do care. And I think it's proof that, this sport, when put back on the right track, has tons of room to grow and people are willing to lend their eyeballs to something entertaining.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I really don't have much to add to that beyond the fact that there's a lot of hope happening right now with this sport. Hope for a full recovery from Ryan, hope for a really solid season with really good ratings, great fan engagement. Hope that some of those people that you talked about where you've never spoken NASCAR to them, we're starting to see a little bit of interest. And, and I don't necessarily want to say that's exclusively because Ryan Newman got into an accident. I would never attribute something to that, but I definitely think that the sport itself, when folks talk about it and when folks want to have these passionate conversations, I do think it makes a difference. And I think with NASCAR, you've got just a community that I can't really explain, where it's that tight knit, always want to be around each other kind of deal. So, we used to talk all the time about getting people to the track and that would help their experience. But I think we're starting to reach outside of that demographic a little bit, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you guys hit all the marks there. It's great to see, especially from the ratings perspective and everybody sitting watching at home. They're extremely good signs and, hopefully they can kind of ride this momentum into the West Coast swing.
Yeah, so, other than the extremely, extremely story-packed Daytona 500, it's kind of a quiet week. Silly season's over, the off season's over, and we're back to the week-to-week grind. We know how last week ended. We have Ross Chastain in the 6th, but other than that, it really has been a quiet week. So kind of taking a full scope of NASCAR, it was just announced Kyle Busch is making 5 starts in Xfinity, which, Kyle Busch is the king of the lower series. That doesn't surprise anyone. He's going to be running those in the 54, but we saw him have so much success last year, winning all the truck races he was in, winning 4 Xfinity Series races. Is this become exhausting as a fan to see these Cup drivers, hop down a level and basically sweep? That's what we see with Kyle Busch. Obviously, he's a generational talent, but at least for me, I know we've committed the lower series now, or NASCAR as a whole is committed to them being the developmental series. So I don't know, something about having these Cup Series drivers be able to drop down and sort of just sweep in the best equipment. He's going to be in Joe Gibbs equipment and in trucks. He has obviously the best team. So I don't know, just for me, it's become a little bit exhausting seeing him drop down and get all those wins.
So here's my argument against that. And I also just want to point out, I think there's on the spectrum of it, there's 2 extremes. There's the people that love it and the people that absolutely hate it. And I don't know if there's an in-between that I've heard of much. What I'll say about it is, let's compare it, and we're comparing apples to oranges here, boys, and I get that, but let's compare it to something like baseball, right? If I'm a prospect coming up in a developmental league and someone's down on a rehab starter just trying to get some more innings in, if I'm coming up, I would probably want to face the best pitcher just to get up to speed before I get up to that next tier. So it almost adds an extra element, and Kyle's going to bring passion and competitiveness to it. We've seen that. So if the guy wants to race, the guy wants to race. I mean, it's in his blood. He does it because he enjoys it, not necessarily because he quote unquote has to, because he's successful at this point in the face of a sport where he wouldn't have to if he didn't want to, but he wants to. And I just think that we're at a point here, and I think we're at a point in most situations across the board in sports where if a guy wants to play, a guy wants to play, you know? So if he wants to get out there, I don't see the harm in it. When it starts taking away seats from guys who might deserve it, maybe that becomes a secondary conversation, but I just don't know that that's happening right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I don't see the harm in it. I think it's great experience for those Xfinity guys to be going up against the best driver in the Cup Series. I mean, I know that sometimes it does get exhausting just seeing them go down there and sweep the competition. But when you look at it from a bigger perspective, I think that it's good for these young guys to kind of get their feet wet with racing the best of the best, because eventually their goal is to get up to the Cup Series and compete with those big boys. And I think that, you know, in that perspective, it's good for those Xfinity drivers. And if they can compete with him and try and steal one, you know, it really looks great for them. So
it's an immersive experience.
Right. Yeah.
An immersive experience.
Absolutely. So there could be a lot of good opportunity with that.
Yeah. And I really echo that as well. I know I say exhausting just because, you know, Kyle Busch really is such a generational talent. And it's one of those where I probably take it for granted how good of a driver he is. You see him week to week, and you just know for a fact he's going to be in the top 10, no matter, not even top 10, top 5, whatever series you're watching. So he absolutely has a place to be in those series. And I think NASCAR is really has taken good steps, at least with the developmental programs, in making sure those guys stay out of the championship hunt so the other guys can shine. So it's sort of just a debate that you see it on Reddit, you see it on Twitter, but it's just one of those that I don't think the debate will ever go away, but it's lingering, that's for sure. And you know, Kyle Busch being the having the most successful truck team as well kind of comes with his perks. He gets to pick and choose who drives those cars, and today Greg Biffle was announced to be running 2 races. So I know Greg Biffle's come. Yeah, he's come back in our group chats a little bit. Obviously won a race last year in the triple truck challenge. Didn't get to cash in on his reward, unfortunately, because he's not a full-time driver. But how fun is it for you guys to see those nostalgia names come back and run races in the lower series?
Dude, I love it. I don't know who's going to be making a T-shirt about it, but I want that T-shirt. I don't know. There's something about Greg Biffle that's just really entertaining to me, and he also knows how to wheel. So, you know, I just think it's really good for the sport to see these guys want to come back and want to continue to give back and compete with these kids. And I just think that ends up making a big difference for a lot of those younger guys to be able to look up to those folks and still be able to drive next to them when they might have thought that they wouldn't be able to do that again. Yeah,
definitely appealing to the nostalgia of the fans as well. I mean, we saw a couple of years ago, Bill Elliott jump back into a car.
Love that.
I mean, come on. Like, it honestly doesn't get better than that. So I think it's great seeing these guys, you know, run 1 or 2 races. And Biffle's name, I do know, was thrown around at the beginning of this year. I know he was a little vocal on social media and, you know, dropping hints here and there. But I love it. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of a new thing that these older veteran drivers are taking to the lower series after they've retired. Obviously, we've seen it with Dale Jr., and he's even hinting at taking some more races in the Xfinity series. So if those lower series become, you know, the young guns and the nostalgia names coming in for part-time schedules, I think that's fun, and I have no problem with that because you're getting the talent of these up and coming prospects racing the guys who have cut their teeth in the sport for so long. So no complaints across the board when you're seeing names, at least last year, like Tyler Reddick and Christopher Bell racing alongside the likes of Dale Jr. I don't see why anyone would not find that extremely entertaining and captivating racing to be watching.
Yeah, especially years ago. I mean, the Truck Series used to be dominated by all these washed up older drivers. And now, this youth movement has just taken over. So it's kind of a blast from the past in a sense. And I mean, it's badass. It honestly, just seeing these guys come back and see what they got left in the tank. It's cool.
And so I guess that sort of wraps it up for the last couple days here. But looking forward, we've got Las Vegas, the second race on the schedule. It's the first mile and a half. So this is the real test. This is where we're going to separate the big dogs from the teams that still have plenty of work to do. That's for sure. So what can we expect, guys? Do you have anything to be watching in this upcoming week, or is the slate's been wiped clean and you're just, looking forward to whatever happens?
Well, there's a couple of guys that I think are going to perform now that we're kind of out of that unpredictable super speedway mentality. Joey Logano's probably a pretty good lock to perform pretty well. Obviously, he won the spring race last year. But I think a guy like Kevin Harvick, who didn't have the best Daytona performance in the last week, it's going to be interesting to see how he steps up to this challenge here. And of course, you got the Busch brothers there, so I'm interested to see how that plays out. But I think it's gonna be pretty cool. And I'll be honest with you, I know absolutely nothing about weather climates, to be perfectly honest, because I know Minnesota's cold in the winter and Florida's hot at all times. But when I looked at the Vegas weather on Sunday, it's going to be like 67 with a low of 46 and sunny. So if you ask me, that's really good racing conditions. The guys aren't going to be burning up too bad in that cockpit. So it'll be really fun to see how things play out. I think it's going to be a good test to get away from that bigger track and kind of shorten things down a little bit more.
For sure, man. I mean, I think we'll finally be able to see our first test of this new Chevy, a lot of new downforce, and I know that guys are really excited about it. So we'll be able to see immediately if they're able to compete. I'm looking at
completely different package.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking at guys like Martin Truex Jr. with his new crew chief. It's kind of their first test on a mile and a half. I mean, obviously, like you said, Kurt Busch last year, West Coast Swing, finished top 10 every race. And he's another one of those guys that has just turned that car around. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, clean slate. These guys are ready to go, and hopefully, conditions are good.
Yeah, with this intermediate track heavy schedule, these are the races that really matter. We see them come up in the playoffs. We see them throughout the year. This is the bread and butter of NASCAR, whether you like it or not. So whatever happens this week is going to be a test to, for the rest of the future. And Kirby, you talked about the Penske guys, Joey Logano in particular, but I think the crew chief swap for them is definitely going to be a highlight of what happens this week. Yeah, Joey Logano might have, succeeded last year with the win, but he's not with Todd Gordon anymore. So it's curious to see if this win is attributed to the driver or maybe the crew chiefs for those guys. So seeing the shakeups is definitely going to be interesting. And I do believe this is the first test, the first week you get to see how these new teams are going to be working together. Guys like Matt DiBenedetto, where you don't really know where he stands. Christopher Bell, you can really see how good that 95 is and how much Joe Gibbs' input is on that car now this year. So I'm definitely going to be glued to the TV for it. That's for sure. But boys, that's it for week 2. We've got a fun weekend ahead of us. We're going to see qualifying. Any predictions there?
It's going to be weird, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's going to be weird. And we get some rain coming in at the end of the week too. So I don't know if the weather's going to be all that ideal heading into the weekend. Sunday looks pretty clear though. So I don't know about qualifying. I hit pretty well on Ricky last week.
Come on, Curb. You're like, you know better than all of us at this point.
Dude,
I'd be remiss not to ask.
Picked Hamlin last week.
I don't know. Listen, I don't know what happened. Maybe I'm the prophet. Probably not, though, and I'll probably fall flat this week. But I don't know. I'll go with Kevin Harvick. We'll see what happens. You don't know. So we'll see how things play out. Who knows? If I get this one right this week, I might have to fly myself out to Vegas. We'll see.
Yeah, pretty sure I picked Kevin Harvick as well. So should at least we'll think alike on that one.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about him all show. I think Kyle Busch is really going to cement himself as an early contender for the championship with with a good qualifying performance here, and he's definitely going to be in the top 5 during the race. But I'm afraid to say anything weather related because last week I said, "Oh, it's going to be a clear and sunny Daytona
Yeah,
500."
you did say that,
and look how that turned
that.
out. So,
but
from here on out,
you know what? We're going to Vegas. That's all that matters.
We're going to Vegas, baby.
Hit the tables. Throw it down. We're going to Vegas.
All right, boys. A pleasure as always. That's going to do it for episode 2 of the Tracktion Compound.
Catch you on the side, boys.
You got it.